Hello everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's webinar, which is Year-End Part 1, all about installing the update and preparing for year-end. We do also have Payroll Year-End Part 2 sessions starting on the 10th of March, and in those we're going to be covering processing payroll year-end itself, start to finish. And just so you're aware as well, something new that we're doing this year, we're actually running even more webinars themed around common topics over payroll year-end. So things like directors' national insurance, starters and leavers, plus lots more. So more information on those at the end of the session. But my name is Alice, I'm one of your hosts and presenters for the session. And as you can see, I'm joined by my colleague Duncan too. So we're both going to be going through the session today. We do also have a really handy team of helpers behind the scenes there today. So Gary, Ollie and David, who'll be answering your questions on the Q&A too. And a little look at what we're going to be covering today too. So Duncan is going to start with a bit of an introduction. So some payroll year-end key dates and deadlines. I'll then be going through installing a year-end update with some top tips for a smooth installation. And then we're going to go through preparing for year-end. So this is mainly kind of finishing your payroll for 2024-25, and then of course getting ready to process payroll year-end. And then as usual, we've got some further support and some time at the end to continue answering your questions as well. So that's what we've got in store. And it is now time to pass over to Duncan to go through that introduction.
Thank you so much, Alice. So I'm going to introduce the session today by running through some of your payroll year-end key dates and deadlines. So I've got these laid out across a timeline for you, and we are going to start with the 24th of February, which was the release date for our payroll year-end update. So the version number at the time was version 31.00.229. But we have released a further update on the 3rd of March, which was a new build fixing a couple of issues that were affecting a small number of our customers. So the new build and latest version of the payroll year-end update released this Monday was version 31.00.231. Now, currently the update is optional, but we do plan to make that mandatory from the 5th of March. So if you haven't already installed the update by the 5th of March and you're not on that latest version, you will be prompted to do so before you're able to log into your payroll. So if you want to manage this yourself, you should get on and install it today, and it will be, as I say, mandatory from tomorrow. Now, following that installation, the next key date will be the 5th of April. That is the last day of the current tax year, 2024 to 25. And by that date, you should have completed your payroll for the last pay date of the tax year and have sent your FPS for that pay run. So whatever your last pay date is of the year should have been completed no later than that date. 6th of April is the start of the new tax year. So any pay date that lands on the 6th of April or later falls into 2025 to 26. And then into the future, we have a couple of deadlines for you. So the 19th of April is the deadline to do your final submission of the tax year. And that's one of the steps you'll complete as part of the year-end process. And then the 31st of May is the deadline to issue P60s to your current employees. So that is any employee employed by you as at the 5th of April. Now, keep in mind, those two dates are deadlines. There's nothing stopping you from completing these tasks before those dates. And in fact, I would encourage you to complete your year-end just as soon as you're ready. And we run through the steps of the year-end process in part 2 of these webinars. So what we will be focusing on today is installing the update and preparing for year-end. So everything that happens up to your last pay date of the year. And then, as I say, in part 2, we'll continue to run through the year-end process and help you get everything set up and ready for the 25 to 26 tax year. So those are your key dates. And with that said, I'm now going to hand back to Alice, who's going to run us through installing your year-end update. So back to you, Alice.
Thanks so much, Duncan. So when the time does come to install, I just want to make sure you're prepared with the kind of steps to complete as well. And again, this is the update to version 30 of Sage 50 Payroll. So to help you get ready to install the update, we have put together a bit of a checklist of best practice for you, just to kind of ensure that it goes smoothly. I just want to say as well, don't panic if you've already done the update and you've not actually done any of these steps. You are still able to install it without doing these, but these just help to kind of avoid any issues and yeah, ensure it goes smoothly. And just to be clear, Duncan did say there has been 2 releases for version 31. I just want to make sure that you know you will need to be on the most recent update, which was version 31.00.231. So that is the one that's available through all of the options I'll be sharing shortly. And again, that's mandatory from the 5th of March. But first on this list is optimizing your data. This is basically like a little spring clean for the payroll. So it's a data management tool and it's going to make sure that everything's where it needs to be and tidies up the data too. You can run the optimize whenever you'd like. The only thing is you can't optimize the company that you're currently logged into. So I will be showing a demonstration of this shortly, just to give it a bit more context. The next step is to check your program directory, basically just to make a note of this from helping about, and you will need this a little bit later in the installation process, just to confirm the files which are going to be updated. After this, it's to check the automatic updates are switched on. This is going to allow the payroll to check for any updates in the future and prompt you to get these downloaded and installed. Just bear in mind, there are some external things that can affect the automatic updates working as normal, such as any antivirus software or firewalls and things that you've got installed. But don't worry, if you can't use the automatic updates for any reason, you can opt to check for the updates manually instead, either from Payroll or, of course, from the Help Centre as well. And then last thing on this list, which we will be mentioning a few times during the webinar, is to back up your payroll data, preferably onto something external like a USB stick or maybe like a OneDrive, something like that. Super important all year round to back up, but especially around installations and payroll year end. So if anything does go wrong, like your computer crashes or something like that, having backup files saved means that you can have your data secure elsewhere. And what that means is you could then restore that data again into Payroll and pick up where you've left off without losing anything. So very important to take backups. And a little top tip from us as well is to name your backups appropriately. For example, before you install the update of Payroll, maybe take one and call it like pre-install backup 2526, something just so you're aware of what that backup is and you know exactly what that kind of contains. So those are your steps to prepare to install. I just want to go to a quick demonstration of each of these steps. So I'll bring up Payroll. And first on this list was optimizing your data. So this is a process that you'll go through when you're opening the program and you're logging into your company. So when you're putting in your username and password. And there is going to be an optimize button there to optimize before you log in. Or if you already are logged into your Payroll, like I am, the other option that you've got is to go to File and Open Company. Now, I did say you can only do this for one company at a time, and you can't do it for the company that you're currently logged into. So just to kind of show you what I mean, and this little asterisk symbol, this is just letting me know which company that I'm currently logged into. So if I try to use this optimize button here, I'd actually get this little message. So I can't do it to the company that I'm currently logged into. If I did want to optimize this company, though, I would just close out of Payroll and then optimize as I'm kind of entering the program again. But let's pick another company, for example. So let's go back to Christmas. Why not? I'll select that company there. I'll click Optimize, and Payroll does all that hard work for you. Doesn't take very long, as you can see there, just a couple of seconds, and we get a message to say the data has been optimized. And that is how you optimize your data. So I'll just cancel out of this screen for now. And that was the first step on that list. Next step would be check the program directory. Now, all you need to do for this is just go to Help and About. And this will load up the support page. And we're just looking for this top left section of program details, and it's the first directory that you can see in this list. So my program directory here is the C drive, program files x86, Sage Payroll. So I just need to make a note of this and keep a hold of that just ahead of the installation process in a little bit. So that was step number 2. Step number 3, this is the automatic updates. So you'll find this option in Tools and Internet Options. So just a reminder, you do need an internet connection for this. But this first tab, Software Updates, is where you'll be able to select your option for this. So as you can see, I do have mine set to automatic. I would recommend this, as what it'll do is automatically check and prompt you to download and install any new updates. So now that this new update is released, if you haven't updated, you will get a window kind of pop up when you open Payroll to prompt you to download that new update if you've got this option selected. Just a reminder as well, this can sometimes be affected by antivirus software and things that you've got installed. So if for whatever reason you can't use this option, the other option you've got is manual. So this won't automatically prompt you to download the updates, but if you did have it set to manual, what you would do instead is just go to help and check for updates, and that's going to kind of manually prompt that check for you. So when it is a mandatory update, which is the 5th of March, what it'll do is bypass this setting. So whether you've got automatic or manual selected, if once it's mandatory, it is going to bring up a message regardless to make sure that you do get that update installed. And this is just to ensure that you are remaining compliant and ready to go with Payroll year end. So once it's mandatory and you don't have the update installed, you won't be able to access your company without installing the update. So that is step number 3 for preparing. And last step was backups. So you are prompted in a few different steps of your payroll to take a backup of your data, such as when you update the records. You can also do one whenever you'd like though, by just going to the File menu and Backup. And this is going to bring up the backup wizard. And this is the last preparation step. So I'm just going to work through this and take one prior to installing. So I'll click Next. I'm going to leave these default files highlighted. Click Next again. And at this point, I can browse to where I'd like this backup saved, if you've got a particular folder that you want the backups going to. And I'm just going to call this something, just so I know exactly what it is. So pre-install backup, like version 31, 25, 26, just something so you're aware of what that is. And then click Next and Finish. And that means my data is secure elsewhere, and I've got that backed up. So that was just a few kind of pieces of best practice for a smooth installation. Again, don't worry if you've already got it installed and you've not done these. These just kind of help to make sure everything goes smoothly. But now that we've prepared to install, the next step would actually be to go ahead and download the update. So if you do have the automatic updates turned on, this screenshot on the side, and this is the window that you'll see when you open Payroll and the new update is available. So it will prompt you to get that downloaded. Alternatively, you can go to Help and Check for Updates to prompt that check and get this window. Or you've also got the option of going to the Help Centre, so we do have the update available on there. You can go to the Payroll Year End Hub, which is just sage.co.uk/PYE. And there's quick links to everything that you need for Payroll Year End there, including this download. But either way, once that new update is downloaded, you will want to make sure that Sage 50 Payroll and any other Sage products that you've got with us are closed for the installation itself. Now, if you do accidentally leave them open, you will get a message to let you know that you need to close the programs, so don't worry about that. But the update won't be able to be installed until the programs are closed. You'll then be able to run the file which is downloaded. This will be an exe file, and you'll then see the messages that you can see on this slide. So first image there, this is just asking if you accept the license. So you just click Accept License, followed by a message confirming your program directory. So this is why we advise to take a note of it. You do want to make sure that the installation's picked up and detected the correct program to update. So if that is the correct file path that you can see, which in my case it is, I will go ahead and click Yes, and then just let the installer do its thing. But if it does come up with the wrong program directory, what you would do instead is click No, and you'll then be able to browse to that file location that you noted down earlier. So definitely important to make a note of that program directory. But as I say, after this, the installer will do its thing, so it's just a case of waiting for that. And it normally does only take a couple of minutes to get this update installed. But of course, that does depend on how quick your computer is, as well as a couple of other environmental factors which could affect that speed. So it's just a case of waiting for that to complete. And while we're here as well, it is always worth mentioning, if you do run into any issues when you're installing the program, we would advise that you run the installation file as administrator. Now, this is most commonly done by right-clicking the installation file, so that's the file that you downloaded in your downloads, and then clicking Run as Administrator. And this is just going to ensure that Payroll can install everything it needs to. Another thing, if you're having issues, that I would suggest is looking into disabling your antivirus software to install the update, just in case that is kind of stopping or blocking anything from happening with the install, and then of course enable that again afterwards. I do want to mention as well, if this doesn't work and you are still getting like an error message or something with the install, I would advise just making a word-for-word note of that error message, including any codes or numbers, and then type that into the help center, because 9 times out of 10, there is going to be a help article explaining exactly what that means, and kind of guiding you through the steps to fix that. And again, that's sage.co.uk/help. But once you do have the update installed, you will get a message to say that Sage 50 Payroll has been successfully updated, and it does advise that you save any work and restart your computer. Now, don't worry if you can't do that immediately. You don't have to do that straight away, but just when you get a moment to do so, yeah, just restart your computer there. But that is the update all installed. So first thing that I would advise that you do after this is, of course, log back into Payroll. And when you first open the program and log into your company, what Payroll is going to do is automatically update and optimize the data. So this screenshot that you can see on the right-hand side of this slide, this is the message you'll see. So as you kind of log into each company, you will get that message to say that it's just upgrading that data essentially to version 31. And then once you're logged into your Payroll company, I would then advise just going to Help and About and checking your version number. So just making sure that that's version 31.00.231. And before we move on to the next section, I just want to have a quick note on network installations too. So if you do have other colleagues who do Payroll, or you've got it installed on multiple computers, each computer that has Payroll installed must be updated to version 31 as well. So once the first computer upgrades to version 31 and opens the program and logs into the company, remember me saying that that data is upgraded to version 31. So then if another colleague tried to open Payroll without updating to version 31, i.e. they're still on version 30, for example, they will get an error message, something like the one on this slide. So errors can look a little bit scary, but all this means is that the company's data itself has been upgraded to version 31, so it can't be opened in like a lesser or a lower version. The way to fix this, it is a simple one. You just need to make sure that everyone who has Payroll installed installs version 31. So you all need to be on the same version number, just in case that affects anyone here. But that does bring us to the end of installing. So I do want to pass back to Duncan for the next section for preparing for year end.
Thank you so much, Alice. So I'm going to take over from here, and we're going to run you through the steps to prepare for a successful year end. And these steps are all geared around completing all of your pay runs for the current tax year, 2024 to 25. So we're going to go through a 5-step checklist and just have a look at these steps just to start with. Step number 1 is to check if you will have a week 53 this year. Now, this step only applies to weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly payrolls. So if you pay all of your staff monthly, you will never have a week 53. You can move straight on to step 2. Second step we'll take a look at is processing and updating your final pay period for 2024 to 25. So that's your last pay date of the tax year. Once you've updated records, the next step is to ensure you've processed any leavers that left in the 24 to 25 tax year and have received their final pay. So a quick check to make sure you've dealt with any leavers. Step 4 is to submit your FPS for your last pay date of the year, and if required, an EPS for month 12. And then step 5 in our checklist is to back up your payroll data. You can never have too many backups. So we're going to run through these steps now, and I am going to start with week 53. So as I just mentioned, if you pay your staff monthly, this step does not apply to you. But if you run a weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly payroll, it is worth checking to see whether you will have what's known as a week 53 this year. Now, to explain why a week 53 comes about, if you take a look at the number of days in the year, so in the 24 to 25 tax year, there were 365 days, and then you divide that by 7, the number of days in a week, you don't end up with a whole number. So there are 52 whole weeks in the year, but there is usually 1 extra day, or in a leap year, there are 2 extra days. Now, if your pay date happens to land on that extra day, this is when you will have a week 53. So it doesn't matter what dates you're paying your employees for, it is the pay date that determines the tax period. And for this year, you will only have a week 53 if you pay weekly, fortnightly, or 4-weekly, and your regular pay date will fall on Saturday, the 5th of April. So Saturday perhaps isn't a very common pay day, as it's not a banking day, but if you do pay your staff on a Saturday and your regular pay date will land on that date this year, you will have a week 53. Another way to look at it is if we check a tax calendar, and we have these available to download in our help center, you'll see that the tax calendar begins on the 6th of April. That is the first day of the tax year. And this calendar is laid out into the various tax weeks and months. So scrolling to the end of the calendar on my screen here, we can see there are 12 months in the year, and all pay dates will fall in those 12 months. So that's why you don't have a week 53 if you pay monthly. But if you pay with a weekly based pay frequency, you'll see here that we do have 52 full weeks, and then the extra pay date for week 53 this year will be Saturday, the 5th of April. So if your pay date is any other day of the week, it's not a Saturday, you will not have a week 53 this year. If it does land on Saturday, the 5th of April, that's when you have one. Now, with a week 53, just means that tax needs to be calculated on a week 1 basis, and there's nothing that you need to do differently when you process this in payroll. So it's just for awareness that tax will be calculated on a week 1 basis. You don't need to change any tax codes. You would simply set your process date as normal, so to Saturday the 5th, if that's your pay date, and then payroll will apply the appropriate calculations to your employees. Now, what will then happen in the new year, usually several months later, is your employees would receive a notice from HMRC, a P800 notice about recalculation of tax. So they may owe a little bit of tax because they've had an extra week's free pay allowance. But that's completely normal, and it might have happened if you've had a week 53 in the past. So hopefully you now know whether you have a week 53 or not. And we're now going to move on to processing the final period of the year. So I'm just going to bring the slides down at this point, and we're going to jump into payroll for a demo. Now, in my example, I pay my staff monthly, so I don't have a week 53. And my last pay date of the year will be the 31st of March, because that's the date I pay my employees in month 12. Now, when we process the last period of the year, it'll work in the same way as any other pay period. But if you have any directors on your payroll and you've set them up with the pro rata basis method, it will result in a recalculation of their national insurance. So I do have a director set up in my payroll. And if I go into their record and click the employment tab, you'll find the director status over on the right-hand side. And there's 2 options for directors. They can either be set up on the pro rata basis, as this director is, or they can be set up on the annual basis. Now, if they are on pro rata, it means that their national insurance throughout the year is calculated in the same way as a non-director, so using weekly or monthly thresholds. And at the end of the year, in the last pay period, that is when it's recalculated with an annual calculation. And I'll go into that in a bit more detail a little later on. So I'm going to select the employees that I need to pay. I do have a leaver and an employee marked on hold, so they're not due to be paid this period. So when I go into enter payments, I'll be able to have them deselected. And then I can work through entering the payments in the usual way. And you can see for this first employee, with them being a director, it is telling me that they're being recalculated on a year-to-date basis. So I'm going to work through my other employees, just to point out that this one is currently receiving statutory maternity pay. And this is a statutory payment that I can reclaim at the end of the month. So I will need to do an EPS for month 12. And I'm just going to go ahead and save the payment values for the rest of my employees. And once I'm happy with those payments, I can then go ahead and run my pension assessment if I use the pensions module, and then produce the usual reports, such as payment summary reports and pay slips, and then upload the pay slips if I'm using the online pay slips option. So I'm going to skip past those steps. You would just do those in the usual way. And once you're happy with your reports, you would then update records. So I'm going to run that option now. In the Update Records wizard, you do have a backup button. So we do strongly recommend that you take a backup at regular intervals. So this would be a good time after you've entered everyone's payments. I'm just going to skip past it for the demo. And I'm going to complete the Update Records wizard. And you can see my confirmation message. So it's reminding me to deal with any levers before I send my full payment submission. So those are the payments updated. And if you scan down the last updated column, you can see that for all of my active employees, it is now showing the 31st of March pay date. Now, the next step was to deal with any levers. Now, just to point out, I do have one lever already in my employee list. They left back in December, and I ran the lever wizard at the time. So they are already dealt with. There's nothing else I need to do for that lever. But at the end of the tax year, it is a good time to review any other employees that might have left if you haven't already made them a lever. So if they've received their final pay, maybe you've had them on hold, but you know now that they've left the company, this is the best time to run the lever wizard for them so that you can report the leaving details to HMRC and take them off your payroll before the end of the tax year. Now, I do have an employee on hold, but this is actually a seasonal worker. So I am expecting them to come back to work for me in the new year. So all I need to do with this employee is leave them on hold until I next need to pay them. Now, in the first pay run of the new tax year, I will be prompted to include their details in my FPS, and that just informs HMRC that they are still employed by us, but they are not currently working, as they work on an irregular basis. And then next time they do need to be paid, all I would do is take them off of hold and I would process them in the usual way. But if you do locate anyone that needs to be made a lever, you can run the lever wizard as you normally would. So there is a link for it within your payroll links to make an employee a lever, or you can find the option from the employee tasks. And we do have another webinar all about starters and levers and common scenarios around year end that you can join us for later this month. It's worth mentioning if someone is leaving towards the end of March, but they're going to be paid in the new tax year, you do need to wait until you've processed and updated their final pay in the new tax year before you come back to make them a lever. And when you do come back to make them a lever, if the leaving date is in the previous tax year, you would just set your process date back to their leaving date when you run the lever wizard. So I don't have any other levers. I'm happy that all levers have been dealt with this year. So I can now move on and I can do my full payment submission for that last pay date. So this is sent in the same way as any other period. I'm going to click onto full payment submission. Now you can ignore this warning. This just comes up because I'm in a training room. You won't see that, but you will see the usual submission screen. And from here, it's going to confirm gateway registration and company details. And then it will give a summary of the FPS information. Now, you will notice that it is not flagged as the final submission for the year, as you will send that separately as part of the year-end process. So nothing to be alarmed about that this says no. That is correct. We would just simply submit the FPS in the usual way, and you can see that that has now been successful. So scanning down my last FPF date column, that is now matching last updated, and that confirms that I have completed payroll and I've done my FPS submission for that last pay date. Now, there is one other submission that I need to do because I'm reclaiming a statutory parental payment. So if I take a look at my P32 report for month 12, when I need to calculate the payment to make to HMRC, you'll see on this report, I have got SMP recovered this period. And that means that I do need to send an EPS to HMRC to report the reclaim values. So when I'm ready to do that, I can either use the link from the payroll tasks, or I can go to the e-submissions tasks and I can click onto employer payment summary. And then I can work through this wizard, say that I'm adjusting my payment because in this case, I've recovered a statutory parental payment. This submission is for month 12. These are the values I've reclaimed in the tax year to date. So it always shows year to date values in an EPS. And then if I do have CIS deductions suffered that I need to report, they can be entered here manually. So no apprenticeship levy calculated for this payroll as I'm under the allowance. And if I complete this wizard, I can then send that to HMRC. Now, once again, it's not flagged as the final submission. That will be a separate EPS as part of the year-end process, but this just has reported my reclaim values up to month 12. So that is completing the final pay run. The last step in the checklist was to take a backup. You saw Alice do this earlier, but I'll remind you it's from the file menu. You can go into the backup option, work through the backup wizard. You'd usually just back up the files that are selected automatically. So these ones here, and then find a suitable location. You can give it a name, pre-PYE 2025, something like that. And then I have a point I can restore back to if I ever need to. So the point just before I ran year end. So that is preparing for year end, but I did say I would come back to the director's national insurance. So you did see as part of that demo, we had a director who was on the pro rata basis, which means that the national insurance is recalculated in the last period of the year. Now, all directors, regardless of status, do need to have their national insurance calculated on the based on their annual earnings and annual thresholds. The difference between the two director statuses is that if you're on the annual basis, that happens throughout the year. So it's a cumulative calculation, and they don't pay national insurance until their earnings are above the primary threshold for the year. But if it's on the pro rata basis, it calculates using weekly or monthly thresholds and then recalculates in the last period. And depending on whether the pay has varied much during the year, that could result in them paying more or less national insurance than they normally do in the last period. So I'll just bring that to life with an example. So the director that we dealt with in the demo is paid a basic salary of just over £3,000, but you'll see in month 9, they also received a £10,000 bonus. And at the time, in month 9, when the national insurance was calculated, that amount is quite a bit above the monthly upper earnings limit. So a lot of the national insurance the employee paid would have been at the 2% rate. Now, come the end of the year, when it looks at the annual earnings, which in this case are £46,300, it means that all of the employees' earnings for the year are below the upper earnings limit. So in month 12 here, we can see that the employee is paying a lot more national insurance than they normally do on the basic wage. And effectively, they're now paying the national insurance that was owed on their bonus payment in December. So come the end of the year, they would have paid the same national insurance on either method. It's just when it gets paid is determined by the director status. So you can learn more about this in our Directors NI webinar that we're running this month. Quick note on the FPS and EPS that you saw in that demo. They are not flagged as the final submission for the year. Instead, you will send a final EPS submission as part of the year-end process. So don't worry that it says no in the submission information. That is completely normal. And then just to recap the checklist, our first step was to check if we had a week 53. So weekly, fortnightly, or 4 weekly, where your regular pay date is Saturday, the 5th of April. We've processed and updated our final pay period for the tax year. We've checked to see if any leavers need to be processed. We've submitted an FPS and in our case an EPS to reclaim statutory payments, and we finished with a backup of the data. And that's me ready to move on and complete the payroll year end. Now, before I hand back to Alice, there is one other thing to start planning for when it comes to payroll year end, and that is the P60s that you'll be giving to your employees. Now, with Sage 50 Payroll, you do have 3 options when it comes to producing P60s, and you'll likely follow the same option that you use for your payslips. So our recommended option is online P60s, where they'll be uploaded to Sage HR Online Services or Online Bureau if you're an accountant. You could email P60s, and they would use the same settings as email payslips, so the same password to protect the document and the same settings whether you've configured it to send from Outlook or via webmail. Or you can go down the traditional route and you can print your P60s, and you don't even need any stationery for that. You can print directly onto plain A4, as all of the background and the template will be printed at the same time. So P60 stationery is no longer available to purchase from Sage or to order from HMRC. So we'd like to just ask you a quick question and see what your plans are for your P60s this year. So I'm just going to put a poll on your screen, which you can join in by selecting the responses that apply to you. So if you would like to, you can tell us how you plan to produce your P60s this year end, and you can choose between the options of printing the P60s, emailing them, uploading online P60s, or we've got a 4th option for anyone who isn't quite sure at this moment in time. So we always run this poll in our year-end webinars, and it's really interesting to see how these results kind of change over the years. I will share the overall totals with you as well, so you can see what other attendees are planning to do this year. I've had about 80% of the vote in, so I am going to close that poll down. And then for those of you interested, let's have a look at the results. So we do have a runaway leader here. The most popular option in our audience today is uploading online P60s with 59% of the vote. In second place, we have email P60s at 33%, and we have 29% of you who are planning to print the P60s. And of course, you can have a combination of these options, just depending on what suits you best. So thanks so much to those of you that joined in with the poll. And if you do want to know more about online payslips and P60s, we are running some webinars in early April, which will take you through how to get that all set up and showing you how it works. So it'd be great to see you at those sessions. So that's about it for this section. I'm going to hand back to Alice now, who's going to run us through some further support. So back to you, Alice.
Thanks, Duncan. Yes, we do have loads of amazing support available to you, so I just want to make you aware of what that is and where you can find it as well. If you do have any more questions as well, get those in the chat. We will be continuing to answer those until we end the webinar. And speaking of webinars, that's the first thing I do want to make you aware of. So we do have our year-end part 2 webinar for payroll year-end. That's going to go through processing payroll year-end step by step, including that final submission that we've been talking about, and of course, producing your P60s and things as well. It will also be going over like any new changes to the programme and new legislation for the tax year as well. So really handy webinar to get signed up to. Loads of dates and times available for this session, and they're starting on the 10th of March and running until the 15th of April. As we've mentioned a couple of times as well, we are also doing some more sessions this year, so we're changing it up a bit. And we've decided to add more sessions to kind of help you with certain topics that we get, a few more questions and queries on at this time of year. So Directors National Insurance, corrections at year end as well, starters and leavers over year end, and as Duncan just mentioned as well, the online pay slips and P60s too. We do also have more sessions on the Sage HR Showcase, so the core HR module, if that's something that you use or are looking at using. And our next HR advice webinar as well. So we do have some special guests from Advisor Plus joining us for this. They are HR experts, so they go through loads of really great real life scenarios and real life advice when it comes to HR and kind of managing your employees and things too. So we would love to see you at some of these sessions. They are already looking pretty busy, to be honest, but everyone is welcome. So head to sage.co.uk/webinars to see what's coming up and secure your spot. Something else to be aware of is the Sage Help Centre. So this will allow you to access loads of different support guides, demonstration videos. We've got all of the recordings of our webinars on here too. And if you do need to get into contact with us for any reason or need some technical support, you do have those options too. So all of the articles that we've been linking on the slides, they've all come from the Help Centre. And yeah, it's a really great resource to be aware of. Sage University as well, so that's sageu.com. You'll be able to set up a free account on here and access e-learning courses and bite-sized learning as well, so slightly kind of smaller courses there. But it's a great way to just expand your knowledge on Sage 50 Payroll. Loads of other Sage products that you can learn about too. So if you do use other products, there are other courses and things on there. And you do have the opportunity to earn certification for that training as well. So that is sageu.com. And last thing I do want to make you aware of that we offer are our bespoke one-to-one services. So if you do feel that you need a bit more like one-to-one support over payroll year end, or maybe there's some things that we've not covered in the webinar that you wish we did, I would highly advise getting more information on these and just seeing about getting yourself booked onto them. The team who provide these sessions are fantastic. There are some of mine and Duncan's colleagues here at the Newcastle office. They are really amazing at what they do. So if this is something that you're wanting to know more about in terms of information or prices, so it does have a charge for this service, what I'm going to do is just launch a poll on your screen. If you do want a bit more information, select yes on the poll and submit, and one of my colleagues will be able to reach out and kind of get the ball rolling with that. So I'll get this poll shared on your screen. We'll leave that open for a couple of minutes, and while we leave that open, me and Duncan are just going to go on mute. We're going to catch up on any questions in the chat there, and yeah, we'll be back in a few moments to kind of wrap things up. And also we do have some kind of questions that we've been picking out throughout the session too, so we'll be answering a couple of those live too. So we'll be back in a few moments. Hello everyone, that is just us back again. Yeah, we have been picking out some questions that have been sent in by you all to answer live now, just around preparing for year end. These ones do seem to be fairly common topics, so we just thought we'd cover these live kind of ahead of ending the webinar, since we do have about 10 minutes left. So I do have two questions that I've picked out for you, Duncan. The first one is, I have a number of staff on hold. Should I take them off hold for year end?
Okay, so there's no need to take them off of hold. The only time you would need to take them off hold is if you need to process a payment for them. So you can keep them on hold throughout the whole year-end process, As long as they've been paid at least once in the tax year, they will still get a P60 when you come to produce those P60s at year end. And then when they next do need to be paid in the new tax year, or whenever that would be, that's the point at which you would take them off of hold. One other thing just to mention on employees that are on hold, the first period of the new tax year, when you do an FPS, it will ask you if you want to include them in that FPS as an irregularly paid employee. So in those circumstances, you would include them in the FPS just to inform HMRC that they still work for you, they're just irregularly paid. And then the next time you need to report any payments to them, you'll have taken them off of hold and they'll be included in kind of a normal FPS. So yeah, nothing you need to do with them over year end, you can keep them on hold.
Perfect, thank you. Great, so that was question number one that we've picked out. Another one that I've got is, how do I handle a leaver who left in March but is getting paid in April for their March hours?
Yeah, so this is another very common one around this time of year, particularly if you're paying employees in arrears in any way. So if you had an employee that worked in March and they're being paid for those hours in April in the new tax year, you would not be able to make them a leaver until you've updated their final payment. So what you would do is you would wait until you've processed that final payment and you've updated records. But the rules around the P45 is that it needs to state their correct leaving date, which was in March, and it needs to contain the year-to-date values from that tax year. So all you would need to do once you've updated records in April is you would change your process date back to their leaving date in the previous tax year. You would then run the leaver wizard, and that will produce the P45 with the correct leaving date and the year-to-date values that belong in that tax year. You can then give that P45 to the employee, and when you do your FPS for the April payment, it will submit the leaving details to HMRC. So we do have an excellent guide in our help centre as well that takes you through those exact steps.
Perfect, thank you.
So I actually have a couple of questions for you around the installations, Alice. First one of these is when the update is installed, will that affect all companies, or do you need to install the update separately for each individual company? So can you explain how that one works?
Yeah, of course. So no, it doesn't have to be done separately. So in this case, if you've got one computer with multiple companies, you only install the update once, and then what will happen is the first time you open each company, it's going to update that payroll data to the new version, so in this case version 31. So yes, the update does update all of the companies on your computer. Kind of changing it up a bit there, though, it does need to be installed once per PC though. So if you do have multiple computers that use payroll or multiple colleagues who use it, you do need to install the update on each of those. So multiple computers, multiple installations. But if it's one computer with just multiple companies, you just do the install once, and yeah, it'll update each company as you kind of log into them.
Perfect, thank you. And another question for you. If I'm halfway through processing my March wages, can I install the update now? And will it retain the payments that I've already entered?
Yeah, so you can install the update as soon as you want to. We definitely advise getting it installed as soon as you can, especially with it going mandatory on the 5th of March. It will retain what you've done so far as well. So obviously on and after the 5th of March, when the update is mandatory, you will have to have it installed before you can access payroll anyway. So if you were halfway through the wages at that point, don't worry. You can still install the update and then kind of come back to where you were and pick up from there. Just to be aware though, one thing it will do is remove the last calculated date just to warn people. So the calculations and payments that you've done, they are still retained, but the last calculated date is removed after the installation. But yeah, same as always, just to avoid any problems, I would advise as best you can following those preparation steps to install. Most importantly though, just get into the habit of taking backups of your data. Yeah, can't stress how important that is.
Great, it's a great tip on the backup as well. So if you've got a backup, you can always get back to where you were. I think we have time for one last question. In fact, there were a few questions that we've had around week 53 that I'll pick up. So a couple of examples here. If the payday falls on the 11th of April 2025, is that going to be a week 53? No, it's not. It's only paydays that fall on Saturday, the 5th of April, that would be a week 53. So in that case, the 11th of April would be your week 1 payment, even if you're paying wages for dates in the previous tax year. So it's the date the employees are paid that determines the tax period, not the dates that they did the work. And similar question there, my payday is the 4th of April 2025. So am I right in saying I have a week 52? Yes, that pay date is in week 52, so you do not have a week 53. The next payday after the 4th of April in that example will be week 1. So hopefully that has cleared up some of the week 53.
Yeah, thanks again for that as well. It's definitely a common theme around the questions. But yeah, that's all we've kind of picked out to answer live. Still about 5 minutes left or so to continue answering your questions in the Q&As. If you do have any last minute ones, be sure to get those in. But if you are leaving us now, just want to say thanks so much for joining us today. I hope you enjoyed it. Yeah, maybe learned something new. And yeah, if you do want to keep any of the questions and answers, do feel free to copy and paste these into something like a Word document for future reference. One last thing from us as well, you will see a short survey as you exit the webinar. So if you do have just a moment to fill that out, we would really, really appreciate that. If you've got anything to say about what we've covered or anything to say about me and Duncan, that would be great. So thank you in advance. But on behalf of us, yeah, and everyone behind the scenes as well, we do hope you enjoy the rest of your week. We'd love to see you on some more webinars in the future. We will leave the webinar open just a couple of minutes to see if any last minute questions come in. But yeah, apart from that, that's us done. So thanks again for joining us, and it is goodbye for now.